Cheers to your perfect family.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to renew my review for the 2026 horror sequel, Evil Dead Burn. The film is co-written and directed by Sebastian Vanecek, and it stars Sulia Yakub. We've got Tandy Wright, Hunter Doohan, Lucille Buchanan, Errol Shand, Maud Davey, and George Puller. Right, okay, this is the next entry in the Evil Dead franchise, following on from Evil Dead Rise that we got, I want to say about 2022, something like that. Now, this is not a direct sequel to Evil Dead Rise, it's just another chapter in the Evil Dead franchise, I suppose, even though they're all linked. We all know that they're all kind of linked. And there's plenty of videos out there, guys, on YouTube that kind of explain the links. Right, so this time we meet a family that has been torn apart by grief. There is the son, Will, who dies in a car accident. His wife, who is French, Alice, meets up with the rest of the family for the funeral. To kind of all say their goodbyes. However, this is also the family of the grandfather who kind of discovered the Deadites and stuff, and he has locked away this legendary knife that can kill these demonic creatures. As soon as that is exposed, then they're going to zone in straight on where it is. And unfortunately, it does, as well as some other bits and pieces. And the Deadite zone straight in and cause havoc amongst this family at their remote house stroke cabin. It's not a cabin, it's a big house. And does what these Deadites do, cause chaos and attempt to take the family out one at a time in increasingly grotesque ways. Right, what are my thoughts on Evil Dead Burn? Wow, right. What are my thoughts on Evil Dead Burn? Well, it's good. For the most part, I had a decent time with this film. I think it was entertaining, it was graphic, it was violent, it was intense. All them things you kind of expect from like an Evil Dead film. There was a lot of talk going into this that it was the most grotesque and violent one of all. I kind of don't agree with that. I mean, that's not to say it wasn't intense and violent, because it absolutely was, and grotesque and over the top. But it was more grotesque and cringy about some of the things it did, not so much the deaths and the violence. It's like, you know, grotesque, like saliva type stuff and whatever, you know what I mean? Just not nice. But I think Evil Dead fans, maybe purists, you know, will probably find a lot in this that they quite enjoy. For me, I felt it was fairly shallow, really. You know, there was very little here in the way of story, I suppose. But do we really go into Evil Dead films for a deep, thoughtful, intellectual story? No, I don't think you could argue any of them have got great stories. You probably. But I felt this one was particularly weak. I didn't really feel any connection to the characters. Even the French wife of Will who died in the crash, who essentially becomes like the final girl sort of thing in the film. Okay, she was okay, but I didn't really connect with her. Any of them really, I suppose. And it just didn't have that kind of mischievous sense of fun that has become, you could argue, a trademark of the Evil Dead films, even if it kind of, these films are losing that identity. The last, this film, Evil Dead Rise, and Evil Dead the 2013 reboot, if you like, you couldn't really argue that they were anything like any of them have like the sense of humour that the earlier Evil Dead films had. And I don't always think that's a bad thing. I think some of the early Evil Dead films, as brilliant as they are, I think we can all agree that Army of Darkness went a bit too far with the comedic approach. And Sam Raimi had a very definite vision that he wanted to create with the first two and the third film. This slapstick horror. That I've read somewhere, so I think that him being quoted that he wanted like the Evil Dead films to be like the Three Stooges, but instead of custard pies, it was like blood and guts sort of thing. So he kind of nailed that tone with them films. These newer films have lost that identity. And depending on how you feel about that, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, me personally, because I think some of the Evil Dead's humour in the earlier films maybe, I think, took it a bit too far. So that, you almost couldn't enjoy it. They were definite horror comedies. These are not horror comedies, and certainly this one is not a horror comedy. As I've said, it's really over the top violence, intense and grotesque. You could argue unnecessarily so at times. It did feel a bit mean-spirited at times, this one. And it was almost like the director was trying to up himself or up the previous director, because the last 3 Evil Dead films, this one and the 2 previously, they kind of hired up-and-coming directors. Last one was Lee Cronin. This guy, Sebastian Vanacek, is an up-and-comer. He did the Infested, I think it was called, spider film that came out a couple of years ago that I haven't watched yet. I haven't got around to that one yet. But, they pick up-and-coming directors and kind of, give them the reins to see what they can do. And generally speaking, they do a really, really good job, and they keep kind of the Evil Dead DNA, but also kind of put their own spin on the franchise. So I did enjoy this. It was almost like an endurance test at times, this one. Like I say, in regards to the intensity of it. But it was satisfying in many ways too. And I did, have a pretty decent time watching it. Do I think it's one of the stronger Evil Deads? No, I don't. I don't generally do ranking videos, but of the 3 modern ones, the 2013 one, Evil Dead Rise, and this is the weakest, I think, of those 3. I thought, Evil Dead Rise was pretty creative in its approach, using like a tower block as like the location rather than the typical cabin in the woods thing. So it kind of feels like this one's referring back to, going back to type sort of thing. But it was okay. It was good. I mean, that's not a very good recommendation, is it? It was okay. But it was. It was okay. It definitely got the DNA of the Evil Dead here. There is another one coming, I believe, in 2028, Evil Dead Wrath. And that one is based in the 70s, so it's going to be a prequel to the original Evil Dead. So I'm quite interested to see where they're going to go with this franchise. I think this is now the 3rd film in the original or the modern Evil Dead films, so it's kind of caught up with the originals in a sense of, there were 3 of them, we've got 3 newer ones, and there is a debate to be had. Has there ever been what you would describe as a bad Evil Dead film? I don't think there is. I don't think there is bad Evil Dead films. There's some that you will prefer more than others. There's some that I prefer more than others. But any that are outright bad, no. And that's a rarity for a franchise, especially a horror franchise. So yeah, check this one out, guys. If you are not used to like really intense graphic horror violence, then you might want to hold out for this one. But why would you watch this if you kind of don't know what you're going into? It's not really a date film, is it? So yeah, Evil Dead Burn, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you going to check this one out, or have you already seen it? And are you looking forward to more Evil Dead films in the franchise? I will see you back here on the channel, guys, with loads more content very, very soon.